Hey everybody, welcome back to Mixing Music Analog and mixingmusicanalog.com and here on the YouTube channel, and we're back for another episode of Inside the Mix. This time out, we're going to be breaking down an instrumental rock track by the band Jupiter Groove. It's a really in the style of Joe Satriani, fantastic band, fantastic tune. We're going to break down the mix and check that out. But before we get started, make sure you like, share, subscribe. And once again, if you're one of those nearly 70% of the people that YouTube tells Uncle Dave that are not subscribed to the channel, but you're watching the videos, please subscribe. It really does help. Also, check out my hybrid mixing courses. Link will be in the description box below. And by the way, if you work all on the box of plugins and you happen to be one of those folks, go over to homerecordingmadeeasy.com because I want to give you a free mixing course. It's worth $100. It's right on the homepage. It's my gift to you just for visiting homerecordingmadeeasy.com. And I think that's it. Okay, let's get going. So, Jupiter Groove, great band, instrumental, progressive rock, very much in the style of Joe Satriani, as you'll hear in a second. I want to say thank you to Jupiter Groove for allowing us to use this song on YouTube as part of this demonstration. So make sure you check all the links in the description box below and go pay them some love. If you like Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, that kind of stuff, Jupiter Groove is right up your alley. Fantastic artists, great bands. Was an honor to work on their mix. I had a lot of fun, and I think we're going to be seeing a little more them soon in the future. I have another one of their tracks called Funkenstein, which I can't wait to show you. It's kind of a funky instrumental track, really, really cool. So anyway, what do we have going on here? Well, this is a pretty small session, and the thing that was a little unique about this particular mix for Inside the Mix compared to some of the other ones we've done in the past is this has very minimal amount of outboard gear being used, comparatively speaking. The SSL is doing 90% of the lifting here, and that's because the track was recorded so well, and it's so well performed, and it had some compression and such as they were recording this stuff. I can tell just by listening to it. I tried to stay out of the way and tried to take more of a minimalist approach here as far as gear goes. So that's what we're gonna take a look at today. So let's jump into Studio One here. And here we are, Jupiter Groove. I'm gonna play you back the print track, which is the track down here in yellow. That was the final mix that I gave to the bands. So here is a little bit of Jupiter Groove's Fall to Freedom is the name of the tune here. Very, very cool. Let's take a listen and then we'll break this down. Here we go. Okay, there we go. So you can go check out Jupiter Groove and check out Fall to Freedom. Again, links will be in the description box below. Fantastic. As soon as I heard this song, I said, sounds just like Summer Song by Joe Satriani, one of my favorite guitar players of all time, and I'm sure a lot of you as well. So let's get rid of this print track here, and let's solo up everything here, and let's take a look at this. Let me just make sure this is all working the way that it should be working. Let's just take a quick listen here. Give me 1 second. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, so what do we have here? Fairly small session. Total of about 25 tracks when you include the samples and some of the parallel compression that I did. But let's start at the top here. So we have a kick Kick sample, snare top, snare sample. Again, I added those. I just copied the track and then added a sample by Slate Trigger, snare bottom, hats, 4 toms, tom 1, 2, and then 2 floor toms, overhead left and right. That's it for the drums. No room mics even. Bass DI, bass mic, track, acoustic guitar, and then we add a series of electric guitars. We have a rhythm electric guitar where they use 2 microphones. They use the 57 and a 121 on the cabinet, very standard stuff. We blended those together. Another pair of guitars here. And then the lead guitar, which is like the lead vocal portion with the wah pedal. Same thing with the 57 and a 121. In the bridge section, we had a synth guitar, again with 2 mics. And then I added a parallel kick and a parallel snare track just by copying the kick and snare. So that's it, that's all we did. So if we look back here at the overhead of the camera, you'll see all the drums are laid out here in brown. We have our bass here in blue, acoustic guitar down here, and then all our electric guitars are down here, the 3 pairs. And then kick and snare are on channels 25 and 26, where I use parallel compression. We'll talk about what we used for that. So if we start off, let's just say with our drum sound here, and everything's being routed down to buses here. I'll take away all the reverbs and such so we can just hear what we got going on. So now on the drums, again, I tried to stay very minimal here, with the exception of drum bus compression, and we'll talk about the master bus here as well. There's no compression on any of these drums. None, because it didn't need it, in my mind. Just didn't need it. They just sounded really, really good on its own. But let's talk about the master bus. So the master bus, again, I'm using my pretty much standard procedure here. We're going from the Empress EQ by GainLab Audio to the 542 Neves to the SPL Big back into the bus compressor on the console. On the Empress EQ, we're doing some sculpting there with some EQ. We're adding a little bit at 8K, we're adding a shelf at 8K of about 2 dB. We're adding a little bit at about 300 hertz, about 1.5 dB, and then we're adding a bunch of some low end, not a bunch of low end, 30 hertz, just to give the track some girth. That's what we're doing on the Empress EQ. 542 Neves, again, using the red circuit, and again, I've said it in every inside the mix. That's pretty much a set it and forget it kind of a module for me. I just kind of drive the signal into it till I hit about the second amber light on the 542s, and that to me is where it sounds its best. And then we're going to the SPL Big to give it a little bit of width. And then back into the G-Series bus compressor. Again, auto release, 10 millisecond attack. We're just tapping the needle. That's it. So I can play this back and I can take away the inserts, which is the EQ, SPL 542, and I could take away the bus compressor. Now when I take away the GainLab's EQ, all the inserts here by this little switch right here, green light is on, no green light means it's out of the circuit. You're gonna hear a volume bump because I'm boosting some frequencies there. But just keep in mind that's what we got. So I'm gonna play this back and I'm gonna take away the 2 master bus stuff and then bring it back in so you can hear it. Here's on the whole mix. So it just gives it a nice glue and polish. Now what I'll do on the Empress EQ is I'm also using the tube drive circuit, which just adds an extra layer of saturation. I can bypass that right on the EQ, where the EQ will stay in play, but I'll just take away the tube boost. So you can kind of hear what that's doing from a saturation point of view. Here we go. So it just adds a little bit more compression sound, and it smooths off and rounds off the top end, gives it a little bit of sparkle. I really like that tube drive. That Empress EQ, again, GainLab Audio. There is a review on the channel already by the time you watch this episode. Just under $2,000. It's the best master bus EQ I've used. Love it. It's so flexible. It can be very, very aggressive or very, very subtle. But I love the way it just kind of pulls everything together, and it's got that Pultec style on the low and the high with the extra midband and some additional shelving and bell EQ curves that you can switch with some of the little dip switches. So check that out. But that's the master bus. So now let's go back to the drums as we were talking about here. That's our final drum sound. Now, what I'm using for reverb here is I am using the Neve AMS reverb. I'm using it on a preset that I tweaked just to give it a little bit of ambience. I'm using it on the snare and on the overheads. I'm not using the reverb, I don't believe, on the toms. Oh, just, a little bit on the toms as well. So I got a little bit on the toms, snare, and overheads, not on the kick, and on the hats as well. So here is, I'll take it away. You'll see it on the overhead camera. The red light means it's taken out of the circuit. No red light means it is live. So we'll start with it on and I'll take it away and bring it back again. It's super subtle. Don't know how well you're going to hear it over YouTube, but listen to the snare. That's obviously where you're going to hear it the most. Just like a 1.6 second decay on like a nice little plate reverb on that Neve AMS. I really like that a lot. So that's our finished drum sound. Now we're doing just some basic run-of-the-mill EQ on the kick and the snare. Again, the stuff was recorded really well. The other thing I did not need or didn't feel I needed or used on this particular track, and I use these all the time, but I didn't feel like we needed it on this song, where the tom tracks are not going through, they're not being used on the Aphex 204. These are the original drum sounds. Now in Studio One, I did add a sample for the kick and the snare. And again, I'm using trigger 2 on the kick, and I'm just using just a standard sample just to reinforce the kick a little bit and give it a little bit more thump. And then on the snare, I'm using my standard kind of go-to, using the Black Beauty detune 3 cents and just blending it together here on the board. Those tracks are also being copied and pasted, and they're coming down to some parallel tracks down here on the end. So let me play this back without the parallel and then bring the parallel in. So it gives a little bit more girth to the kick and the snare, obviously, and in the track it really helps it cut through, but it's semi-subtle. I wanted to give most of the processing in this track is on the drums because I wanted the drums to compete with all these guitar tracks, right? I wanted to make sure they stood up nice and tall. Now it's going down to a drum bus. Again, we're on my standard Wes Audio NG bus compressor. Here, we'll bring this up for the drums, and then we're going to the API 5500 EQ. Here's the Wes Audio drum bus compressor. Maybe about 3 dB of compression. And again, I'm going pretty subtle even here on this track. Like I said, that there's not a ton of processing really happening in this at all. Because again, it didn't need it. It sounded great on its own. So I just said, let's get out of the way, let's enhance stuff. But this is a great lesson, whether you're in the box with plugins or out of the box with hardware. Just because we have all the tools doesn't mean we need to use them all. We want to do everything with a purpose. If we don't need it, don't use it. And these drums really didn't need it. I just wanted to kind of glue them together. So from there, we're going to the API 5500 EQ. And on there, we're boosting up about 4 dB at 50, a little bit at 12K, a little bit at 5K. I'll go over there and I'll bypass it. Here we go. Okay, so again, just again, reinforcing it, semi-subtle, but it really makes a huge impact in the track. And what I'll do is I'll play back the whole track, and then I'll take away both this drum gust compressor and the EQ, and then we'll see how that sits. And then we'll talk about the compression, the parallel compression compressors here in a second. So here is the track with everything in, and I'll take away the bus compressor on the drums, and I'll take away the EQ so you can hear what that does. Okay, so that's what those two things are doing. Now on the parallel tracks, kick and snare, we're using the DBX 160As. Got two of them in the rack we're using. And again, on the kick drum, we are doing about, let's see. About 4 dB of compression here. Slow attack, fast release. I'll take it away here on the board. So you'll see the little green light means it's in the circuit, out of the circuit. When I take the green light away, I guess you can look at the overhead and keep your eye on the green light. Here's with it in. So it just gives a little bit more bottom, a little bit more underneath, and a little bit more sustain on the click. Snare drum, same thing, using the DBX 160A. So you can really hear how it sustains the snare, which is great. If I do both the kick and snare and I take both the compressors away, so these are just on the parallel tracks. Okay, DBX 160As, fantastic compressors, use them all the time. Kick, snare, love them. Okay, so that's our drum sound. Now if we go to our bass we had a mic track and a DI track. And what I did on the mic track is I added the Universal Audio Ampeg SVT3 Pro, which I use a lot. I just love this on anything, any bass for the most part I use this on, and it just sounds great. So here is the bass without it, with this plug-in on it, then I'll take it away. So I wanted to add some grit and some drive to this, which is what we did on this, and then we blend it with the other bass track. So there we go, and then those are coming down to a bass group, and that bass group is going to a compressor. Both those tracks are going to the audio-scape 260 VU, compressing about 5 dB. About 8 dB of compression there. And that 260 VU, that DBX clone, sounds wonderful on bass. Love it on bass, sounds really, really good. If I take it away, I think we're gonna have a big volume jump because I have to bypass it at the compressor. Let me see, let's try to bypass it. Let's see if it's gonna help you understand what that thing is doing. Yeah, so you could hear when I take it away, you lose the whole bottom. When you bring it in, it really thickens up the bottom and really glues it together really nice. That's an awesome compressor by audio-scape. If you want to check them out, audio-scape is great, and everything I have by them is fantastic. And no, it's not sponsored, and no, I don't get anything if you buy anything from them. So that's our bass. Pretty straightforward. Fairly high in the mix, and using a lot of that grit, which is what he wanted. Okay, from there we have an acoustic guitar track. I think we do. Okay, strummed acoustic, pan slightly left. I'm using the Blackline Audio Bluey on that, aside from some EQ here. Pretty high, pretty big cut here on the high pass filter at about 150 hertz. Add a little bit of sparkle at 12K. Took a little bit out at about 200, just pulled a little bit out. And then I have the Bluey. And the Bluey's doing about 6 dB of compression or so. So here's with it, and I'll take it away. Keep your eye on the green light. Green light is in. No green light means there's no compression. Probably could have done a better job level matching that. Turn down that output a little bit. Just push up the fader. Either way, here we go. What I love about the Blackline Audio Bluey, it's the Blue Stripe, Chris Lord-Alge, replica of his #1 Blue Stripe. It's very aggressive and it's very sparkly. And I love it. If I want to add a little bit of grit and a little bit of top end, this is the one that I reach for. It sounds much different than the audio-scape Blue Stripe, the 76A. So it's nice to have those two different kinds of colors. So again, here's with it. So it has a nice sparkle with a little bit of grit to it. So that's our acoustic guitar. Now we start going down to all our electric guitars. Aside from EQ on our 3 pairs of electrics, and then any compression that's happening from the Neve 542s or even the Empress EQ or the bus compressor, no extra compression being used. Because they're heavily distorted guitars for the most part. They already sound great. They were probably recorded with a little bit of compression on the way in, and so there was no need to really over squash this thing, so I left it alone. So our first pairs of guitars are here. So even though that's kind of a clean and it's picked, I didn't want to compress it. I wanted the attack of that note because it sits behind all these distorted electric guitars. So I just did some EQ on this. So I did a low cut filter at about 90 hertz. We added about 4 dB at 5K, and that was it. So here's with the EQ. That's it, really subtle. Next set of guitars, these are distorted guitars. Okay, so those are being panned a little bit. Put the reverb on these. I'll turn the reverb on in a minute. There was reverb on these as well. So the clean guitars we just did were panned a little bit right. These are panned a little bit left, which left the middle open for the two lead guitar tracks, which we'll talk about in a minute. So here is this distorted guitar. Guitars have a lot of EQ on them. So 5K, about 6 dB. We also added about 1.5K. We added a couple of dB. And then we pulled out a little bit, or the high pass filter or low cut filter is at like 150 because they were really dark sounding. So here's without the EQ. Oops. Here's the original tracks. So I brightened up quite a bit. And when you bring in those other two guitars that we just talked about, the clean ones, so they're panned a little left, a little right, and that brings us to the last set of guitars, which is our main, what would be the lead vocal, the main guitar parts. Again, a 57 and a 121 blended together. Here they are in solo. Again, a lot of EQ on these. So on these guitars, we have a low cut filter, and again, at around 100 hertz, a little bit more than that. Quite a bit of boosting at 5K here, especially on the 57 mic. The 121, not as much, a little bit less. And then we added about, let's see, about 2 dB at about 2.5K, and that's it. So here's with the EQ, then I'll take it away. And there's no extra compression on this track. It didn't need it. It just sounds good the way it is. So now if I bring in the reverb too, now I added the audio-scape XL305R to all of these tracks, except for the drums. That's being picked up by the Neve, as we talked about a little earlier. But there's more reverb on this track than typical for me, because one of the things that they kind of referenced, they wanted their track to sound a little more like, and they gave me a Joe Satriani song, a specific song, which had a little more reverb in it. So we have a much longer decay than what I would normally put on a track. But because they wanted it to sound like this particular reference track, it had a lot more reverb in it. So I added a little bit more reverb. So you could hear with the 3 sets of guitars, if I solo all of those up, oops. Here we go. So you can really hear the decay there. So those are on all the tracks, except for the drums. As I said, it's even on the acoustic. Here's the acoustic brought in. And there's our reverb. Now our last 2 tracks here that we could talk about in this episode is we have in the bridge, we have a synth guitar left and right here as well. Let's play those back. So these were just filling up underneath. They weren't too obvious in the mix. So again, we added a bunch of low cut filter here and also some top end EQ at around 8K. We're adding probably 6 dB or so. And we're pulling out a little bit of the mid range at around 200. So that's what we have here. And then when you bring it into the whole track, so it's fairly subtle, but it's there. It's there. It's a nice little added layer. And I think that's it. I mean, yeah, that's it. I mean, we only use, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hardware compressors in this mix, and then the master bus stuff. That's it. Everything else is EQ on the board, just balance and some automation to the final print track. That's all we really needed. Simple, very well recorded, very well performed. That's all you really need. So that was the goal here, was to keep things really, really simple, keep it open, don't get in the way of the music, let the music do the talking, and just kind of sweeten and enhance stuff. And that's exactly what we did. And as far as the balances go, to how loud things should be, I really referenced the Joe Satriani song, which I don't want to play here because I'll get a bunch of copyright strikes, but I spent a lot of time referencing that song and listening to the balance of the drums versus the bass versus Joe's lead guitar, which oddly enough is a little bit more tucked in the pocket than you would originally think. A lead vocal or a lead guitar part, you normally stick it right on top of the mix, not in his music or not in that particular song. So I spent a lot of time making sure that that sonic EQ characteristic was the same, as well as the balances between all the instruments. And I think we've achieved that. So anyway, that's it. That was the breakdown of this song. Again, thank you so much, Jupiter Groove, for allowing us to use this. It was really, really fun. And again, I'm going to bring you Funkenstein, I think is the name of the song, which is more funky, but very much in the style of Satriani, coming up probably in the next couple of months here. Again, go check out Jupiter Groove's websites and all their socials in the description box below. They're on Apple Music, they're on Reverb, they're all over the place. They have YouTube channels, Facebook pages, Instagram channels. Go check them out, especially if you're into instrumental rock, like in the style of Satriani. That's where they kind of live, and they do a fantastic job. And I really do appreciate them allowing us to use the music. So go check out Jupiter Groove. Again, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Mixing Music Analog. Let me know in the comments below what other videos you want to see. And until the next episode of Inside the Mix, I've been Dave with Mixing Music Analog and mixingmusicanalog.com. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching today, and I'll see you guys in the next video.